Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The rain fell softly over the castle turrets, a steady whisper against ancient stone. The torches along the Gryffindor common room flickered low, their flames bowing in rhythm to the storm outside. Near the hearth, a boy with untidy chestnut hair and thoughtful gray eyes sat alone, a parchment spread before him. His quill had long stopped moving, though ink still bled from its tip in tiny, uncertain dots. His name was Elias Thorne, 6th year Gryffindor, a name once spoken with warmth among his housemates, brave, clever, quick with a laugh. But tonight Elias was quiet. The fire crackled low and the shadows seemed longer than usual. On the parchment lay a letter. It bore no salutation, no closing line, just a single sentence written in sharp, heavy strokes. "They killed my father." Elias stared at the words until they blurred. The owl had come that morning, the ministry's seal broken hastily by Professor McGonagall herself. His father, or Corwin Thorne, slain in a raid against Death Eaters. The letter had been brief, coldly factual, killed in the line of duty. Elias had always thought his father invincible. He'd grown up hearing tales of duels with dark wizards, of captured criminals, of narrow escapes. Corwin Thorne had been a hero in the eyes of the ministry, and in the eyes of his son. But now that hero lay beneath the earth, and Elias was left with nothing but rage, the common room door opened softly behind him. "You're still up?" came a voice, gentle, a touch worried. It was Clara Dawlish, his best friend since first year. Her brown curls framed a face that had always seemed bright with curiosity, though tonight it was clouded. "I couldn't sleep," Elias said, not looking up. Clara stepped closer. "Elias, I heard about your father. I'm so sorry." He said nothing. His jaw tightened. The silence stretched until she knelt beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to face this alone, you know. Dumbledore, he'll want to help." At that, Elias's expression hardened. "Help? He sent my father out there. He knew it was dangerous." Clara's hand fell from his arm. "You don't mean that." But he did. In that moment, he meant every word. That night, long after Clara had gone to bed, Elias sat by the dying fire, staring into the embers. The shadows in the flames seemed to twist and whisper. "Power," they murmured, "strength." He didn't know if he dreamed it, or if something truly stirred in the depths of the firelight, but he thought he saw for an instant a shape. A pale hand, a flicker of a serpent's eye, and when he closed his eyes at last, the sound of the storm had changed. It no longer sounded like rain, it sounded like applause. The days that followed were strange ones. Elias returned to class, went through the motions, but his mind was never present. He no longer joined the laughter at the Gryffindor table or the late-night games of exploding snap. He began spending hours in the library searching for spells that pushed the boundaries of what was taught. Professor Slughorn noticed first. "My boy," he said during a late potions lesson, "you've been quiet of late, and your drafts so precise. You're not dabbling in the advanced recipes, are you?" He chuckled, but there was a question beneath the jest. Elias merely smiled. "Just trying to improve, Professor." Slughorn smiled back, but the concern lingered. That evening, As Elias left the dungeons, he was stopped by a figure in the corridor, a tall man in dark robes, his face half hidden in the dim torchlight. It was Professor Severus Snape, then still young, though already with the air of someone who had seen too much. "Mr. Thorne," Snape said quietly. "A word?" Elias turned, uneasy. "Yes, sir?" "I knew your father," Snape said. His voice was smooth, controlled. He was a capable man. The pause between words was long enough to chill the air. Elias waited, saying nothing. "There are some," Snape continued, "who would tell you that vengeance is weakness, that grief clouds judgment. But sometimes grief is the only thing that gives us clarity." His eyes gleamed faintly. "Tell me, Elias, have you ever wondered whether the Order truly fights to end the darkness or simply to control it?" Elias blinked. "I don't understand." Snape's gaze lingered, then almost imperceptibly he smiled. "You will." He turned, his robes whispering against the flagstones, and was gone. Elias stood in the corridor long after the sound of footsteps faded. He did not yet know it, but that single conversation would mark the first step of his journey into a shadow he could not yet name. And though he would try to tell himself it was for justice, for his father's memory, deep inside another truth began to take root. He wanted power, real power, the kind that could make the world tremble and never again take from him what he loved. Outside, the rain ceased, and the moon broke free of the clouds. Its light poured through the castle windows, silver and cold, falling across Elias Thorne's face. In that pale light, his eyes no longer looked like those of a boy. They looked like the eyes of someone standing at the edge of a very dark road, ready to take the first step. The winter that followed was long and cruel. The snow lay deep across the grounds of Hogwarts, and the lake froze so solid that even the giant squid slept beneath it, motionless as stone. The castle's windows glowed like watchful eyes in the dark, and the fireplaces roared louder than ever. Yet within the warmth of Gryffindor Tower, Elias Thorne felt nothing but cold. He had stopped writing home. There was no one left to write to, and had taken to wandering the corridors late at night, his wand lit only by the faintest glow. He listened to the castle breathe, the ancient walls sighing with secrets. Sometimes he found himself before the mirror of Erised, though he had not meant to find it. In its polished depths, he saw his father alive again, standing tall beside him, his hand upon his shoulder. But as Elias reached out to touch the glass, his father's reflection seemed to fade, and in its place, Elias saw himself cloaked in black, his wand raised in triumph. He told no one of that vision. It was near the end of term when the whispers began. News drifted into the school like chill air, rumors of Death Eater attacks across the countryside, whole families vanishing overnight. In the great hall, even the bravest fell silent when the owls arrived each morning, their wings heavy with letters edged in black. One evening, as Elias walked alone along the 7th floor corridor, a soft voice spoke from the shadows. "You shouldn't be here after hours, Thorne." He turned sharply, hand tightening around his wand, but it was not a teacher. It was Clara Dawlish, her prefect badge glinting in the lamplight. "I could say the same for you," Elias replied with a wry smile, lowering his wand. Clara stepped forward, her expression wary. "You've been avoiding everyone, even me. What's going on with you?" Elias hesitated, then looked away. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." He almost told her everything then. The visions, the fury, the nights spent reading forbidden spells under his blanket. but he stopped himself. Clara's world was one of light, of rules and faith in Dumbledore's cause. She could not see what he saw, a war that was being lost, and a headmaster who asked his followers to sacrifice without ever giving them the power to win. Instead, he said quietly, "I'm tired of being weak, Clara. That's all." "You're not weak," she said firmly. "You're grieving. There's a difference." Elias gave a short, bitter laugh. "Tell that to the Death Eaters. Grief doesn't stop them." Clara frowned. "Elias, promise me you won't do anything foolish." He said nothing. She reached out, touching his arm. "Please." He met her gaze. Her eyes were warm, pleading, and for a moment the darkness in him faltered. But before he could speak, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Filch's lantern swung around the corner, and they fled in opposite directions. Elias did not see Clara again for several weeks. When Christmas came, he stayed at Hogwarts. Most students left for home, but he remained, wandering through the empty corridors while the snow fell beyond the glass. It was on one such night that he encountered a figure waiting by the great doors, a man in dark robes, hood drawn low. "You've been seeking answers," the man said softly, "and I have them." Elias's wand was in his hand before he knew it. "Who are you?" The man lowered his hood, revealing the pale, sharp features of Severus Snape. "You remember our last conversation?" Snape said. "I told you grief brings clarity. Tell me, Thorn, has it done so?" Elias lowered his wand, though his heart pounded. "I want justice for my father, real justice, not lectures about mercy." Snape studied him, unreadable. Justice and vengeance are easily mistaken for one another. Maybe they're the same thing. A faint smile touched Snape's lips. "So many have thought so before you." He turned, his cloak sweeping the floor. "If you wish to see the world as it truly is, come to the dungeons tomorrow evening. No questions, no excuses." And with that, he was gone. Elias didn't sleep that night. He turned the invitation over and over in his mind. What could Snape mean? He had heard the rumors that the potions master was trusted by Dumbledore, yet whispered to consort with darker powers. A spy, they said, a double agent. A man walking a razor's edge between the light and the dark. When the hour came, Elias went. The dungeons were empty, silent, but for the dripping of water along the stone walls, Snape was waiting, a single candle flickering on his desk. Without a word, he handed Elias a vial of silvery liquid. "Veritaserum?" Elias asked. "Something far rarer," said Snape. "Drink." Elias hesitated, then obeyed. The potion burned cold as it slid down his throat. For a moment, the world tilted, and then he was no longer in the dungeon. He stood in a ruined village. The sky was red with fire. Cloaked figures moved among the burning houses, their laughter echoing like knives. In the midst of it stood a tall man in black robes, his face pale as bone, his eyes red as fresh blood. Elias knew at once who it was. Lord Voldemort. The Dark Lord raised his wand, and the air trembled with power. "This is the future, boy," came Snape's voice beside him, though Snape was nowhere to be seen. "This is the strength the Order cannot match. You may hate it, but you cannot deny it." The vision shattered. Elias gasped, stumbling back into the dungeon, his heart racing. Snape's eyes were fixed on him, calm and dark. "You see now," said Snape quietly, "light and dark are illusions. Power is the only truth. The only question is, what will you do to claim it?" Elias said nothing. His mind whirled. The image of Voldemort burned behind his eyelids. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. "Teach me." Snape inclined his head ever so slightly. Then listen carefully, Mr. Thorne. From this moment on, you are no longer a child of Gryffindor. You are a student of shadows. That night, Elias dreamt of fire again, but this time he did not flinch from it. He stood within the flames and felt no pain. The world had changed, and so had he. When the term resumed and the other students returned, none noticed that something in Elias's eyes had shifted. But Clara Dawlish did. She caught him in the corridor one morning, her voice soft but trembling. "You've changed," she whispered. Elias smiled faintly. "Perhaps I've just stopped pretending." And as he walked away, Clara felt a chill she could not explain. For the first time since she'd known him, Elias Thorne frightened her. Far below, in the potions classroom, Snape extinguished a single candle and looked toward the ceiling. Somewhere above, his newest pupil walked toward a destiny from which there would be no return. Spring crept into the castle like a secret. The snow melted from the turrets and the forbidden forest awakened, whispering again beneath the wind. Students spoke of Quidditch and exams, of love letters and lost essays. But Elias Thorne thought of none of these things. His mind was consumed by what he had begun in the dark. Under Professor Snape's covert tutelage, Elias learned spells the others never heard spoken aloud. He learned to silence his thoughts, from legilimency, to read the faintest tremor of deceit in another's eyes, and to call the faint shimmer of flame into his palm without a single word. Snape's lessons were not held in classrooms, but in the forgotten chambers beneath the castle, in the ruins of old dungeons that even Filch dared not enter. The first rule, Snape told him, was secrecy. "If the light knows your name," he had said, "the dark will never trust you. If the dark knows your heart, the light will destroy you. So you must belong to neither, and to both." Elias learned well. He spoke little now, and when he did, his voice carried an edge that made others step aside. He began winning every duel in defense against the dark arts. Professor McGonagall watched him with a mixture of pride and unease, but said nothing. Then one night, as the last embers of the common room fire faded, an owl tapped upon the window. Its feathers were black as soot, and its eyes gleamed like drops of pitch. Elias opened the parchment it carried and read the message written in a tight, elegant hand. "The order gathers. The mission awaits. Hogsmeade, midnight." It bore no signature, but he knew the sender, Alastair Moody, the grizzled Auror who had known his father. Elias hesitated. He had not been summoned by the order in months. Since his father's death, he'd been considered too young for their work. But something in the message drew him. Perhaps it was duty, perhaps guilt, or perhaps he wished to prove that he was no longer the boy they pitied. He left the castle under the cloak of night, his wand hidden in his sleeve. The streets of Hogsmeade were deserted, the snow crunching softly beneath his boots. Near the old apothecary, a cloaked figure stepped from the shadows. "Thorne," said Moody's voice, low and gruff, "you came." Elias nodded. "What's the mission?" "There's a safe house in Yorkshire," said Moody. "We've word that Death Eaters are gathering there. Something about recruitment. We're to intercept them. Dumbledore wants them captured alive." Elias's hand tightened on his wand. "Alive?" Moody's good eye narrowed. "We take prisoners, boy. That's how justice works." Elias said nothing, though a voice in him whispered otherwise. They apparated to the outskirts of a ruined village. The night was thick with mist, and the air stank of smoke and decay. Moody signaled for silence as they approached a crumbling farmhouse. From within came laughter, low, cruel, unmistakably human. There were 3 Death Eaters inside. Elias saw them through the broken slats of the wall, masks gleaming silver, wands raised as they toasted some unseen triumph. His blood roared in his ears. Moody whispered, "On my mark, stun and disarm." But Elias did not wait for the mark. Before Moody could speak, he burst through the door. Expulso. The spell struck the table, shattering it into flame. One of the Death Eaters screamed, his robes catching fire. Another raised his wand, but Elias was faster. Crucio. The word left his lips like a blade. The Death Eater fell to the floor, writhing in agony. Moody's voice roared behind him. "Thorn, stop! That's forbidden magic!" But Elias did not stop. The firelight gleamed in his eyes as the Death Eater's screams filled the room. Only when Moody seized him by the collar and wrenched his wand away did the spell break. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Moody stared at him, his face pale beneath his scars. What in Merlin's name was that? Elias's breath came hard and fast. He deserved it. "We don't torture," Moody snarled. "We fight. You're lucky I don't drag you to Dumbledore right now." Elias met his gaze coldly. Maybe Dumbledore's way isn't enough. For a moment, Moody looked as though he might strike him. Then he only shook his head. "You're your father's son, but you're walking a dangerous road, boy. Remember that?" He turned away, binding the stunned Death Eaters with invisible cords. Elias said nothing. He stared at the bodies on the floor, at the scorch marks his spell had left, and felt a strange satisfaction twist inside him. When he returned to Hogwarts, he found Snape waiting. The man stood at the edge of the Black Lake, his reflection rippling in the dark water. "So," Snape said softly without turning, "you've tasted what true power feels like." Elias froze. "How did you know?" Snape's smile was faint. "I know everything that happens in this castle. Tell me, did it frighten you?" "No," Elias said. "It felt right." Snape's eyes glimmered in the moonlight. "Good. Then you're ready." He reached into his robes and withdrew a small polished coin engraved with a serpent. "There will come a night when you are summoned," he said. "Bring this coin to the place it burns warmest in your hand. There your true test will begin." Elias took it, feeling the faint pulse of heat against his palm. Over the following weeks, he tried to bury himself in his studies. He smiled when spoken to, laughed when others did, but beneath it all, the coin lay hidden in his pocket. Always warm, always waiting. He dreamed of masked figures and serpents of fire, of a voice calling him by name. Then one night, as the full moon rose over the lake, the coin flared hot against his skin. He woke with a gasp. It glowed faintly, silver green, in the darkness. He knew what it meant. Elias dressed in silence, cloaked himself, and slipped from the tower. The castle seemed to hold its breath as he passed, down through the gates, across the fields, into the forest where shadows moved like living things. At last he reached a clearing, and there, among the trees, stood Snape, and 3 others in masks of bone white. "You came," Snape said softly. Elias nodded, though his throat was dry. "What is this place?" Snape's gaze was unreadable. "A threshold. Step across it and you can never go back." The masked figures raised their wands. "Do you pledge yourself to the Dark Lord?" one hissed. Elias hesitated only a moment. He thought of his father's death, of Dumbledore's secrets, of the night he'd been told to show mercy when mercy meant weakness. Then he raised his wand. "I do." A sharp pain seared his left arm, and he cried out, When he looked down, he saw it, the faint outline of a skull and serpent burning into his skin, the mark. He had crossed the threshold. As the pain faded, Snape's voice came quietly. "Welcome to the darkness, Mr. Thorne. Let us see what sort of Gryffindor you truly are." And for the first time, Elias felt no doubt, no hesitation, only purpose. The boy who had once dreamed of justice was gone. In his place stood a Death Eater. The next dawn was crimson and cold, as if the sun itself rose blood-stained over the forest. Elias Thorne returned to the castle before it stirred awake, his robes damp with mist, his left arm burning beneath his sleeve. He'd washed away the blood from his initiation, but the mark remained, dark and vivid like a brand upon his soul. He stared at it when he was alone, tracing the shape of the serpent winding through the skull. It was beautiful and terrible, all at once. His heart still raced when he remembered the ceremony, the cloaked figures chanting softly, the chill of the forest wind, the strange magnetic presence that filled the air when the Dark Lord had appeared through the mist. Voldemort's voice had been softer than he imagined, almost kind. "You seek strength, Elias Thorne," he had said, his red eyes gleaming, "but strength is not given, it is taken, and now it is yours." Now that voice haunted him, echoing in his dreams. At breakfast the next morning, Clara Dawlish sat beside him, smiling as she poured tea into her cup. "You look pale," she said lightly. "Up late again?" Elias nodded without meeting her gaze. Her eyes were too clear. He could not bear her to look at him as she once had. "I heard Professor Moody left the castle," Clara went on. "Something about a failed mission in Yorkshire. 3 Death Eaters escaped. Can you imagine? Dumbledore's furious." Elias's hand froze on his spoon. "Escaped?" he asked, his voice steady. "That's what I heard," she said. "Whoever botched that mission, well, I wouldn't want to be them." He forced a laugh and said nothing more. But inside, his stomach twisted. The Death Eaters he had attacked, the ones Moody had bound and taken, had escaped. It should have comforted him. It didn't. It meant someone had helped them, someone who knew what happened that night. And Elias began to wonder whether his initiation had been coincidence or whether it had been planned. Classes resumed, and he tried to lose himself in the rhythm of lessons. He was sharper now, faster. Even Professor McGonagall seemed to regard him with a wary respect. "You've improved," she said one afternoon, after he transfigured a stone into a falcon with flawless precision. "Your father would have been proud." Elias flinched. He hadn't heard those words in months, and they cut deeper than curses. He nodded, muttered thanks, and left the classroom quickly. Pride? That was what they always said. But what would his father have thought if he saw the mark on his arm? That night, Elias met Snape again in the dungeons. The potions master regarded him coolly, as though measuring his soul. "You've done well," he said. "The Dark Lord is pleased." Elias's voice trembled. "He knows my name?" "Of course." Snape's tone was calm. "He knows all his servants, and he will test them." "Test?" "There will be a task," said Snape, "a small one. But the first task is always the hardest." He drew a parchment from his robes and handed it over. Upon it was a single name, Clara Dawlish. Elias's breath caught. "What? What do you mean?" Snape's eyes gleamed faintly in the lamplight. "She's the daughter of an Auror. The Dark Lord believes her father has information about the Order's next meeting. The girl is a weakness. You will use it." Elias stared at the name until the letters blurred. "No," he said softly. "I can't. "You can," said Snape, his voice sharp, "or you'll be seen for what you are. A coward who took the mark but not the oath." Elias turned away. "You don't understand." Snape's hand shot out, gripping his arm where the mark lay hidden. "I understand better than you think," he hissed. "Do what must be done, Thorn, or you will die." That night, Elias could not sleep. He sat by the window in the dormitory, watching snow drift over the black lake. His wand lay across his knees, his thoughts racing like wildfire. He remembered the day he and Clara had first met, two 11-year-olds trembling before the sorting hat. She had been sorted into Gryffindor moments after him, and they had laughed together through that first feast, friends from the very start. She had stood beside him through every triumph, every failure. She was the last piece of his old life that remained untouched, and now he was being told to betray her. He closed his eyes, pressing his palms to his face. There must be another way. The next day, Clara found him in the courtyard. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her breath fogging the air. "You missed breakfast again," she said. "You've been so strange lately. Is something wrong?" Elias forced a smile. "I just need to talk to you. Tonight, by the lake." She frowned. "Is it serious?" "Yes." "Then I'll be there." When the moon rose that night, Elias waited by the frozen shore. His wand trembled in his hand. He could not do it. He would not. Clara arrived wrapped in a red cloak, her curls catching the moonlight. "Elias?" she called softly. "What's this about?" He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "I have to leave Hogwarts." Her eyes widened. "Leave? Why?" "It's not safe for me here." His voice broke slightly. "And not for you either." She stepped closer. "Elias, what's going on? Please tell me." He wanted to. Merlin, he wanted to tell her everything. The mark, Snape, Voldemort. But before he could, pain seared across his arm. The dark mark flared to life beneath his sleeve, burning like molten iron. He gasped, clutching it. Clara's eyes widened. "What's wrong?" Elias's breath came ragged. A shadow moved between the trees, and then 3 figures appeared, masked and silent. Death Eaters. Snape's voice echoed through the clearing. "You hesitated too long, Thorn." Elias raised his wand, his heart pounding. "Stay back," he warned. Snape's eyes glinted through his mask. "You've made your choice, then?" Clara stood frozen, realization dawning in her face. "Elias, what have you done?" "I was trying to protect you," he shouted, but it was too late. Spells erupted through the night, blinding flashes of green and red. Elias deflected one, then another, shouting for Clara to run. She fled toward the castle, her cloak a streak of scarlet in the snow. Elias turned his wand on Snape. "You lied to me." Snape's answer was a whisper. "I told you the truth, you just refused to hear it." The duel that followed lit the forest with furious light. Spells cracked like thunder. Branches burst into flame. Elias fought with all the fury of his grief, his anger, his confusion. But Snape was stronger. He disarmed him with a flick of his wand, and Elias fell to his knees, panting. Snape lowered his wand. "You will not die tonight," he said quietly. "The Dark Lord still has use for you." Then, with a sweep of his cloak, he vanished, leaving Elias alone amid the wreckage. The forest was silent once more. Snow fell on the scorched earth, smothering the flames. Elias stared at the ground where Clara had stood moments ago. He did not know whether she had escaped or what she now thought of him. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had crossed another line, one that could never be undone. The mark on his arm pulsed softly beneath the falling snow, like a heartbeat that was no longer his own. Elias did not return to the castle that night. He wandered through the forest until dawn, the snow clinging to his boots, his breath shallow in the cold. The wound on his arm still throbbed where the dark mark had burned to life, pulsing with a sickly rhythm that felt alive beneath his skin. When the sun rose, he found himself standing at the edge of the forbidden forest, where the trees thinned and the frost began to glisten like shards of glass. Hogwarts loomed in the distance, golden in the first light of morning. For a long time he simply stared at it, unsure if he still belonged within those walls or anywhere at all. He had wanted strength. He had wanted justice. But what he had found was a curse that burned him from the inside out. By the time he slipped back through the castle gates, the corridors were already stirring with students. He moved unseen, his hood drawn low. When he reached Gryffindor Tower, he paused before the portrait of the fat lady. She frowned. "You look dreadful, dear." "Password," he said hoarsely. "Lion's glory," she replied after a sigh, swinging open to admit him. The common room was warm, the fire blazing bright, but it felt strange to him now, too bright, too safe. He climbed the stairs, opened the door to his dormitory, and froze. Clara was there. She stood by his bed, her red cloak still damp from snow, her eyes fierce with anger and fear. "I waited for you," she said quietly. Elias's heart dropped. "Clara, you're a Death Eater." The words trembled, but her voice did not break. "I saw the mark on your arm. Don't lie." He swallowed hard. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," she said. "You've been lying to everyone, to me. You killed Merlin, Elias. You used the Cruciatus curse." He flinched as if struck. "I was trying to stop them." "Stop them?" she snapped. "Or join them?" Her eyes glistened, and for the first time he saw not anger but heartbreak. "You were my friend," she whispered. "How could you become one of them?" He stepped closer, desperation in his voice. "Clara, please. It's not what you think. I'm still fighting for the same thing. I'm doing it my way now." "Your way?" she said bitterly. "Your way means murder. It means darkness. You think you can use their power without becoming one of them? You're already lost, Elias." He reached for her hand, but she drew back. "If Dumbledore finds out," she said quietly, "you'll be expelled. Maybe worse." "I don't care," he said. "I only care about stopping them." "Then stop being one of them," she whispered. "Come with me. Tell Dumbledore everything. It's not too late." For a moment, he wanted to believe her. He wanted to walk with her to the headmaster's office, confess his sins, and let Dumbledore's wisdom untangle the chaos inside him. But then the mark on his arm burned again, fiercer than before, as though it sensed his hesitation. The pain brought him back to reality, the reality that Voldemort knew everything. If he betrayed the Death Eaters, they would kill him. And Clara too. "It is too late," he said finally, his voice hollow. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Then I don't know who you are anymore." She brushed past him and fled the room, the door slamming behind her. Elias stood in silence for a long time, the sound of the fire crackling faintly behind him. When at last he looked down, he saw the dark mark had faded but not disappeared. It never did. That evening Snape summoned him again. The message came not by owl but by the faintest whisper in his mind, a spell of communication that prickled through his skull. "The Dark Lord requires you. Come at once." Elias followed the call through secret passageways beneath the castle, through a narrow corridor lit only by blue flames. It led him to a chamber he had never seen before, stone walls covered in runes, a round table in the center. Snape was there, along with 2 others in masks. "You failed your test," one of them said coldly. Elias stiffened. "I didn't fail. I made my choice." "The wrong one," said the masked figure. Snape's voice cut through the air. "Enough! The boy acted with caution. The Dark Lord values potential." The first Death Eater scoffed. "He showed weakness." Snape's eyes flashed. "He showed restraint, and that is rarer." The 2 stared at each other, silent sparks of menace passing between them. Finally, the masked figure turned away. "Very well. The Dark Lord will decide his fate himself." Elias's heart pounded. "He's coming here?" Snape gave him a warning look. "Not here, but soon. You will be summoned again." The Death Eaters vanished one by one, leaving Snape and Elias alone. Elias turned on him. "You set me up." "I tested you," said Snape evenly, "as I was once tested." Elias's voice trembled with fury. "You wanted me to hurt her." "I wanted to know if you could be trusted," Snape replied. "To survive in that world, you must be capable of cruelty, or capable of hiding it." Elias stared at him, realization dawning. "You're one of them," he whispered. "But you're still at Hogwarts. Why?" Snape's eyes were as dark as ink, because sometimes the only way to fight the darkness is from within it. The words sank into Elias's mind like stones sinking into water. Was that what he was now? A spy? A double agent? Could he still call himself that after what he had done? Snape stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen carefully, Thorn. Whatever you think of me, know this: I serve only one master, and it is not the Dark Lord. But you..." He paused. "You must decide whom you truly serve, because soon you will not be able to serve both." And with that, Snape swept from the chamber, leaving Elias alone beneath the flickering blue flames. He stood there for a long time, his thoughts a storm. He could betray Voldemort and die. He could betray Dumbledore and lose his soul. There was no middle path, no place left for him between the light and the dark. When he returned to the dormitory, Clara's bed was empty. Word spread by morning that she had been sent home. Her father had requested it. She would not return for the rest of the term. Elias felt the loss like a blade between his ribs. He tried to convince himself it was for the best. She would be safe now, far from him, far from what he was becoming. Yet when night fell again, and the mark pulsed faintly beneath his sleeve, he knew it was not finished. Somewhere in the darkness, the Dark Lord was waiting, and sooner or later he would call his new servant to war. The castle slept under a veil of mist, its spires hidden in clouds that drifted low and pale across the night sky. Yet Elias Thorne did not sleep. He sat by the window of the Gryffindor dormitory, staring out into the darkness. The faint moonlight touched the snow on the grounds, making it shimmer like silver dust. Somewhere beyond that glittering field, a war was rising. He could feel it pulsing through the mark on his arm. Every night it burned faintly now, a living reminder of the choice he had made. A week had passed since Clara's departure. Her absence hung heavy in the common room. The laughter had faded, the chatter softened, even the fire seemed dimmer. Elias's friends had stopped asking questions. They had begun to look at him differently, more distant, as though they could sense the change in him without understanding it. He no longer cared. Snape had vanished from the castle for days at a time, leaving no trace of where he went. When he returned, His eyes were darker than before, his patience thin as parchment. The tension at Hogwarts grew. Aurors were said to be patrolling the outer gates, and rumors of the Dark Lord's return drifted in whispers through the corridors. And then, one night, the summons came. It began as a faint sting beneath Elias's skin, then flared into searing heat. The dark mark burned so fiercely that he dropped his quill in shock, the parchment before him curling in the sudden firelight. He knew at once what it meant. The Dark Lord was calling. He left the dormitory at once, moving like a shadow through the corridors. The fat lady protested as he slipped past her portrait, but her voice was muffled by the thundering of his own heartbeat. Down through the silent halls he went, through secret passages and hidden doors, until the cold wind struck his face beyond the castle walls. The moon was full above the forbidden forest. Its silver light fell upon a ring of trees blacker than night itself. He walked among them until the burning in his arm grew unbearable, and then suddenly it stopped. He was not alone. Figures emerged from the shadows, cloaked, masked, silent. One by one they encircled him, until the air was thick with tension. Then a voice spoke from the darkness, soft, almost kind, but carrying a weight that made Elias's knees tremble. "Come forward, Elias Thorne." The speaker stepped into the moonlight, pale skin, eyes like twin rubies, a smile that chilled the blood. Lord Voldemort. Elias bowed deeply, his heart hammering. "My lord." "I have heard much of you," said Voldemort, "the son of an Auror, a Gryffindor, and yet here you stand, bearing my mark." "I serve you," Elias said, forcing his voice to steady. "Do you?" Voldemort's head tilted serpent-like. "Severus tells me you hesitated when tested, that you showed mercy." Elias swallowed hard. The Dark Lord raised a pale hand, silencing him. "Mercy is a disease of the weak. Tell me, boy, do you wish to be weak?" "No, my lord." "Then prove it." Voldemort turned slightly, gesturing to two Death Eaters who dragged something or someone from the shadows. When Elias saw who it was, the world seemed to stop. It was Clara Dawlish. Her wrists were bound, her face pale but defiant, even in fear. Elias took a step forward. "My lord, please." "Silence." Voldemort's voice cut through the air like glass. "This girl has seen too much. She has whispered your name to her father, who whispers to Dumbledore. Such betrayal cannot be tolerated." Elias's chest constricted. "She's innocent. She doesn't... Do not lie to me." Voldemort's eyes glowed brighter. "You care for her?" The words were not a question. Elias's mouth went dry. "She was my friend." "Then this will be your test," said the Dark Lord. "Prove your loyalty. Kill her." The words fell like a spell that drained the warmth from the air. The circle of Death Eaters closed in, their masked faces unreadable. Elias's wand felt like lead in his hand. Clara met his eyes, no tears, no pleading, only sorrow. "Don't," she whispered. "Oh, whatever you've become, don't do this." Voldemort smiled faintly. "Well, Elias Thorne, your father died for the ministry that failed him. Will you die for a girl who will never forgive you?" The world seemed to narrow to a single point. The sound of his own heartbeat drowned everything else. Elias raised his wand. His hand trembled. "Please," Clara said softly, "you can still choose." And in that instant, something broke inside him. He turned, his wand flashing, not toward her, but toward the nearest Death Eater. "Expulso!" The blast of magic hurled the masked man backward into the trees. Chaos erupted. Spells filled the clearing. green and red, fire and light. Elias seized Clara by the arm, pulling her toward the forest's edge. "Run!" he shouted. She hesitated only a second before obeying. They darted between trees, curses exploding behind them, branches shattering as spells struck the trunks. Voldemort's voice echoed through the forest, calm and cold. "Foolish boy, you cannot hide." Pain seared through Elias's arm again. He stumbled, clutching the mark, and fell to his knees. Clara turned back, pulling at him desperately. "Get up," she cried, but he could barely breathe. Voldemort's power pressed on him like a physical force, his mind filling with whispers that weren't his own. Traitor. Weak. Mine. "Go," he gasped. "Run to Dumbledore. Tell him it's begun. I won't leave you. Go," he roared, forcing himself to his feet. He raised his wand and shouted a spell so powerful that the ground split before them, hurling the pursuing Death Eaters aside. Clara looked at him one last time, tears streaking her face, then vanished into the trees. Elias turned back toward the clearing. Voldemort was there, no longer smiling. The red eyes burned like coals. "You disappoint me," he said softly. Elias lifted his wand, though his arm trembled. "Then kill me." Voldemort's head tilted. "No, Elias Thorne. Death is a mercy you have not earned." He raised his own wand. There was a flash of blinding light, pain beyond anything Elias had ever known, and then nothing. When Elias awoke, he was lying on cold stone. His wand was gone. His robes were torn. The dark mark still burned, but faintly now, as if mocking him. He was alive, but barely. Somewhere far above, thunder rolled. He dragged himself upright, realizing with dread that he was in one of the castle's hidden catacombs. He did not know how he had returned, only that he had. The echo of Voldemort's voice still lingered in his mind. "You are mine." Elias stared down at his hands, trembling. He had turned against the Dark Lord, saved Clara, defied his master, and yet he bore the mark still. He would never be free of it. Outside, the storm broke over Hogwarts. The war had truly begun, and in the depths of the castle, a broken Gryffindor swore that before it ended he would destroy the darkness that had claimed him, even if it cost him everything that remained of his soul. When Elias Thorne awoke again, dawn was bleeding through the cracks of the dungeon stones. He lay upon the cold floor of a forgotten chamber, his head pounding, his skin damp with sweat. Every muscle ached. The echo of pain still throbbed in his arm, and the dark mark shimmered faintly in the dim light, its edges raw and red, as though freshly branded. He remembered everything: the clearing, the Dark Lord's gaze, Clara's face pale in the moonlight, and a shudder passed through him. Somehow he had survived. Voldemort had spared him, not out of mercy, but for some darker purpose. The chamber was silent save for the steady drip of water from a crack in the ceiling. Elias sat up, wincing as the motion sent pain down his side. His wand was gone, but his mind, fogged though it was, began to stir. The last spell he had cast, the force of it had torn the ground apart. Perhaps it had also torn the bond that should have killed him. A door creaked. From the shadows emerged Severus Snape, his black robes whispering over the stone floor. He regarded Elias with unreadable eyes. "You're alive," Snape said softly. "Unfortunately," Elias rasped. Snape knelt beside him, conjuring a vial of pale blue potion. "Drink." Elias eyed it warily. "What is it?" "Something that will keep you alive a little longer. You can decide later whether that was a kindness or not." He drank. The liquid burned his throat, but the pain in his body dulled. Snape leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "You defied the Dark Lord. Elias gave a bitter laugh. You were there. You saw. I saw you live, Snape replied, and I saw him let you. That interests me. Elias turned his head. He wants me to suffer. Perhaps. Or perhaps he sees use in you still. I betrayed him. Snape's dark eyes met his. So did I. The words hung in the air like a secret too heavy to breathe. Elias stared, uncertain if he had heard correctly. Snape continued quietly. There are many kinds of loyalty, Thorn. Some are to men, some are to causes, and some are to the living against the dead who would rule them. Why tell me this? Elias asked. Because you've seen too much to go back, Snape said. You cannot return to the Order. Dumbledore may forgive, but his followers will not. Nor can you return to the Dark Lord's ranks. You are now what we call lost between shadows. Elias gave a grim smile. And what happens to those who are lost between shadows? Snape's gaze hardened. They choose which way the light falls. He straightened, his cloak whispering as he turned toward the door. Rest. You will need your strength. For what? Elias demanded. Snape paused. War, Thorn, the one you started tonight. And then he was gone, leaving Elias alone once more. Days passed. The castle above him bustled with rumors. Word spread that Death Eaters had been seen near Hogsmeade, that the Ministry was panicking, that Dumbledore himself was calling upon the old oaths of the Order. Elias avoided them all. He spent his hours in silence, hidden deep within the castle's forgotten catacombs, nursing his wounds and his fury. Each night he dreamed of fire, of Clara's scream, of Voldemort's eyes, of Snape's voice whispering, "You must choose." When he woke, his decision burned clearer than the mark on his arm. He would not serve either side. He would make his own war. He began by gathering what he could. There were old spell books in the restricted section, books his father once studied, now covered in dust and guarded by enchantments that shrieked when touched. Elias disarmed them one by one. He learned hexes meant for aurors, wards meant to trap dark wizards, and charms forbidden by the Ministry. He studied the art of concealment, how to mask one's magical signature, how to vanish from the eyes of tracking spells. He became a ghost in his own school, unseen and unheard. And then one night, an owl came. The letter bore no seal, but the handwriting was familiar, sharper, steadier than his own. Clara Dawlish. He tore it open, his hands shaking. Elias, Dumbledore knows everything. I told him you tried to save me. He believes there's hope for you still. Please come to him before the Death Eaters find you again. You don't have to do this alone. Clara. For a long time he stared at the parchment, his chest tight. Hope. That word felt foreign to him now. But before he could decide, another letter arrived, delivered not by owl, but by the shadow that seeped through his wall. It was a whisper, a voice that coiled around his thoughts. My faithful one, it said, you live. I am pleased. You are to return to me. There is much to be done. Voldemort, the Dark Lord's summons thrummed through his veins like poison. Elias fell to his knees, clutching his head. His mind burned with two voices, Clara's, gentle and pleading, and Voldemort's, smooth as silk and cold as stone. In the end he stood. He would go to neither. Instead, he left the castle entirely. It was midnight when he slipped beyond the gates of Hogwarts, the wards humming faintly as he passed through. The road stretched ahead, winding through frost and fog. Behind him the castle glowed faintly against the horizon, a memory fading into the dark. He traveled north, toward the ruins of his family's home. The Thorn estate had been burned during the first raids, a casualty of war. What remained were blackened stones and ghosts of laughter. But beneath those ruins lay something his father had hidden long ago, a vault sealed with blood and flame. Elias stood before the scorched hearth, muttering the old words his father had once taught him. The ashes stirred and the floor split open, revealing a staircase that spiraled into the earth. He descended into darkness. The vault's door was carved with the thorn crest, a lion wreathed in fire. Elias pressed his hand to it, whispering his name. The mark on his arm flared, and the stone groaned open. Inside were relics, his father's wand, his mother's spell book, and a chest bound in iron. When he touched it, the chest opened to reveal a vial filled with liquid silver, essence of shadows, a potion that could hide one's life force even from the keenest magical senses. Elias held it to the light. "Father," he whispered, "you fought for the light." But the light wasn't enough. He pocketed the vial, took up his father's wand, and rose from the vault. When he emerged, dawn was breaking again. He stood amid the ruins, wind cold against his face. For the first time since that terrible night, his purpose was clear. He would not fight for Dumbledore, nor serve Voldemort. He would destroy them both if he had to. He would burn the disease from the world that had taken everything from him. The Gryffindor who became a Death Eater was gone. In his place stood something new, something born of fire and shadow. Elias Thorn, the outcast. Elias Thorn, the hunted. Elias Thorn, who would shape the fate of wizards and monsters alike. And though he did not yet know it, the choices he made from that dawn onward would decide whether he would be remembered as a savior or as the darkest traitor Hogwarts had ever known. The northern wind howled through the ruins, carrying with it the smell of frost and ash. Elias Thorn stood at the edge of what had once been his home, the charred stones black beneath a pale morning sun. Snow covered the remnants of walls that had sheltered his childhood, blanketing every memory in cold silence. He raised his father's wand and murmured a charm. The air shimmered and ghostly outlines appeared. The echo of rooms, the faint laughter of a family long gone. He saw his father standing by the window, his mother at the table, her wand stirring a steaming cauldron. Then the vision faded like mist. He was alone again. Elias knelt in the ashes and closed his eyes. "If there's anything left of you," he whispered to the shadows, "I'll finish what you began, but I'll do it my way." The words vanished into the wind. He turned toward the road, the cold biting at his face. He had no destination. Every path was dangerous now. Both sides hunted him. Voldemort's Death Eaters for his betrayal, and the Order of the Phoenix for what he had become. His only ally was the silence between the two. Days passed as he journeyed through the wild north. He avoided towns and villages, sleeping in forests and forgotten ruins. He lived off what little he could conjure and what the land offered. At night, he practiced spells. In secret, wards, cloaking charms, defensive barriers. The air around him hummed with growing power. Once he came across a band of Muggle travelers. They offered him bread and fire without question, and he sat with them beneath the stars. For a moment, he almost felt human again, but when one of them asked his name, he hesitated. "Elias," he said at last. "Just Elias." He left before dawn. On the 5th night, he reached the edge of a frozen valley. In the center stood a ruined watchtower, ancient and half buried in snow. It offered shelter and something else, a feeling of being watched. He climbed the crumbling stairs and lit a small fire. The stone walls flickered with orange light, and for the first time in weeks, warmth returned to his fingers. He was about to close his eyes when a voice spoke from the darkness. "You hide well, Thorn." Elias spun, wand raised. From the shadows stepped a tall figure wrapped in a deep green cloak. The hood fell back, revealing a face he recognized at once, sharp, stern, and lined with exhaustion. "Professor McGonagall?" Her eyes softened for only a moment. "So it's true then? You live?" Elias lowered his wand, uncertain. "How did you find me?" "Dumbledore has his ways." She took a step closer, her boots crunching softly on the frost. "You've caused quite a stir. The Death Eaters whisper your name like a curse, and the Ministry has sent aurors in every direction. You've become a ghost, Elias." "Maybe that's all I am now." McGonagall's expression hardened. "You're not beyond saving." He laughed bitterly. "I killed Professor. I wore their mark." "You also saved a girl's life at the cost of your own," she said. "Don't pretend that means nothing." Her words struck something deep in him. "Clara, how is she?" "Safe?" McGonagall said. "Her father has taken her to France, but she worries for you." He turned away, staring into the fire. "She shouldn't." McGonagall's gaze lingered on him for a long moment. "The headmaster wants to see you." "I'm sure he does," Elias said dryly. "To decide whether I'm a prisoner or a weapon." "Neither," she said. "To decide whether you still have a place among the living." He said nothing. "Dumbledore believes that even those who have fallen into shadow can find their way back," she continued. "But he cannot protect you if you stay out here. Voldemort's followers hunt you, and they will not stop." Elias stared into the fire, the flames reflected in his eyes. "If I return, Dumbledore will see what I've become, and he'll never trust me." "Then prove him wrong," she said quietly. When she turned to leave, he called after her. "Why are you helping me?" McGonagall paused in the doorway. "Because once, long ago, I watched another Gryffindor lose himself to the dark. I will not see it happen again." Then she was gone, leaving him with the crackle of fire and the echo of her words. He didn't sleep that night. By dawn, his decision was made. The road to Hogwarts was long and treacherous. The castle was hidden now behind layers of protective magic, and approaching it, uninvited, could mean death. But Elias knew its wards better than most. He had lived within its walls, learned its secrets, and now he would use that knowledge to return. As he neared the familiar valley, his heart began to pound. The castle rose in the distance, veiled by fog, its towers gleaming faintly in the morning light. The wards shimmered around it like glass. He whispered an incantation under his breath, the same charm Snape had once taught him to conceal his presence. The spell wrapped around him like a cloak of smoke. Slowly, carefully, he crossed the invisible boundary. The air tingled against his skin, resisting, testing. For a moment he thought the wards would reject him, that the castle itself would sense his corruption. But then the resistance broke, and he was through. He made his way toward the astronomy tower, where McGonagall had told him to come. Every stone of the castle felt alive with memory. The laughter of students, the whispers of old portraits, the faint echo of his father's voice when he had visited once long ago. When he reached the tower, Dumbledore was waiting. The headmaster stood by the window, the morning light glinting off his silver hair. His half-moon spectacles caught the glow like twin stars. "Elias," he said softly, "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." Elias hesitated. "I almost didn't." Dumbledore turned to face him, his blue eyes sharp and kind all at once. "And yet, here you are. Tell me, my boy, why?" Elias swallowed. "Because I'm tired of running." "From whom?" "From everyone. From myself." Dumbledore nodded slowly. "A wise beginning." He gestured to the chair before him. "Sit." Elias did. For a long moment, Dumbledore studied him in silence. "You've seen the Dark Lord?" he said at last. "Yes." "And you lived. That is rare." "He let me live," Elias said, "because he thinks he owns me." "Does he?" Elias's voice hardened. "Not anymore." "Good," Dumbledore murmured. "Because we have need of someone who walks where others cannot. Someone who knows the dark from within." Elias frowned. "You want me to spy for you?" "I want you to choose," Dumbledore said gently. "You've already risked your life to save another. That tells me what you are, not what you were." Elias looked away. "I don't know who I am anymore." "Then let that be your strength," said Dumbledore. "For those who no longer know themselves cannot be tempted by what they once desired." Outside, the first light of dawn spread across the lake, gilding the water in gold. Elias rose slowly. "If I do this, if I fight for you, there's no turning back." "There never was," Dumbledore said softly. Elias stood in silence, the mark on his arm burning faintly beneath his sleeve. He met the headmaster's gaze, and in that moment something like peace stirred within him. "Then tell me where to start." And so began the redemption of Elias Thorne, the Gryffindor who became a Death Eater, and who would soon learn that even in the darkest war, courage may still burn brighter than the curse that binds the soul. The storm over Hogwarts raged for 3 days, and during those 3 days, Elias Thorne did not leave the tower. Dumbledore had given him no orders, no instructions, only time. Time to rest, to think, to remember. But rest was impossible. Every time Elias closed his eyes, he saw fire. He saw Voldemort's face in the clearing, saw Clara's eyes shining with tears, saw his father's grave swallowed by snow. When the storm finally broke, the castle was hushed beneath a pale dawn. Elias stood by the tall window, watching the clouds drift across the lake. He had not spoken to anyone since his return. Even McGonagall kept her distance, though her sharp gaze followed him whenever their paths crossed, as if she feared he might vanish again. It was on the 4th morning that Dumbledore summoned him. The headmaster's office was, as Elias remembered, filled with soft light, the scent of old parchment, and the slow ticking of silver instruments. Fawkes, the phoenix, perched upon his golden stand, preening his scarlet feathers. When Elias entered, the bird lifted its head and regarded him with bright, knowing eyes. "Elias," Dumbledore said gently, rising from his desk, "you look better. Sleep can do wonders." "I didn't sleep," Elias replied. "Ah," said Dumbledore, smiling faintly. "Then perhaps guilt did." Elias said nothing. The headmaster motioned for him to sit. "I will not pretend that I can erase what you have done, or the pain that brought you there, but I can offer you a purpose." Elias met his gaze. "You want me to fight?" "I want you to spy," Dumbledore corrected softly. "Voldemort believes you are dead, or worse, broken. That gives us an advantage. You know his servants, his ways, his signs. We can use that." Elias's hands tightened on the arms of the chair. "You're asking me to return to him." "I am asking you," Dumbledore said. to finish what your father began." The words struck deep. For a long time, Elias said nothing. Then slowly, he nodded. "What do you need me to do?" Dumbledore leaned back, studying him. "For now, nothing. We must rebuild your strength, your magic, your trust. The Order will not welcome you easily." "I wouldn't expect them to," Elias said. "Nor should you," Dumbledore replied. "But their faith is not what matters. It is your own." He rose and crossed to the tall window, his robes whispering softly. "There is darkness gathering beyond the forest, Elias. The Dark Lord prepares for war, and the Ministry will not see it until it is upon them. We will need every ally we can find, even those who walk a dangerous line." Elias hesitated. "Like Snape," Dumbledore's eyes twinkled faintly. "Ah, you've spoken with him." "He saved my life," Elias said. "But I don't know whose side he's truly on." Dumbledore smiled sadly. "Neither does he, sometimes. But I trust him, and I ask you to do the same." That night, Elias returned to the dormitory Dumbledore had prepared for him, a small room overlooking the lake. He lay awake long after the candles had burned low, listening to the quiet lap of the water against the shore. He wondered whether Clara still thought of him, whether she still believed there was hope. He doubted it. He hardly believed it himself. Yet the next morning, when he woke, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Resolve. He began training at once. The room of requirement became his refuge, a space that shifted with his need, forming chambers for dueling, meditation, study. He practiced until his magic burned through his veins like fire. He learned control, precision, silence. Snape visited him often, their lessons wordless and relentless. The older wizard offered no comfort, only correction. "You still think like a Gryffindor," Snape said one night as Elias staggered back from a disarming curse. "You rush forward, you feel before you think. That is what nearly killed you." Elias wiped blood from his lip. "You sound like you regret that it didn't." Snape's eyes narrowed. "I regret nothing, except wasted potential." He flicked his wand, and Elias's weapon flew from his grasp. "Again," Snape said coldly. They fought until dawn, until Elias's magic flared so bright that the torches guttered and died. When he finally collapsed to his knees, his wand clutched tight. Snape's expression changed, almost imperceptibly, from contempt to something like approval. "You are learning," he said quietly, "and learning, Thorn, is survival." Weeks passed. Outside, the world darkened. Villages burned, families vanished, and the name of Voldemort spread again, like plague, through whispered lips. One night, Dumbledore called the Order to gather. Elias stood at the edge of the table in the old stone house that served as their safe house, the smell of dust and fire thick in the air. The faces around him were familiar yet cold. Moody, Lupin, Kingsley, and others who had once been his heroes. They looked at him as though he were a stranger. When Dumbledore introduced him, the murmurs began at once. "He can't be trusted," growled Moody, his magical eye whirling. "You said it yourself. He bore the mark." "He still does," Elias said quietly, pulling back his sleeve. The skull and serpent glimmered faintly in the candlelight. "But it burns when the Dark Lord calls, and I would rather it burn on my skin than on someone else's grave." Silence fell. Lupin was the first to speak. "Then why return? Why risk this?" Elias's voice was steady. "Because I know what they are. I've seen what they'll do, and I won't let it happen again." Dumbledore nodded. "You have heard him," Whether you believe him or not is your choice, but we need every wand willing to stand against the dark." One by one, the others nodded, reluctant but not dismissive. After the meeting, Elias lingered in the hall, his mind whirling. Snape appeared beside him like a shadow. "So," Snape said softly, "you've joined the light again." "Maybe," Elias said, "or maybe I'm just tired of darkness." Snape regarded him for a moment. "Then learn to live between them. It's where men like us belong." That night the first mission came. Dumbledore sent Elias and Snape to intercept a Death Eater courier traveling through the moors. The wind cut through them as they apparated into the bleak open fields, the grass bending like knives. When the enemy appeared, a hooded figure gliding across the mist, Elias's pulse quickened. The duel that followed was swift, brutal, and silent. Elias moved with precision born of rage and discipline. He disarmed the enemy with a flash of blue fire, the wand flying into the air. Snape caught it mid-flight and cast a binding spell. When the hood fell, Elias froze. The man beneath was barely older than he was, a young wizard with fear in his eyes. "Please," the boy gasped, "don't kill me. They made me swear." Snape's wand remained raised. "He knows too much." Elias hesitated. "He's just a child." Snape's gaze flicked to him. "So are you." The boy looked between them, trembling. "You're Thorn, aren't you? The one who betrayed the Dark Lord? He said you'd come." Elias lowered his wand. "Tell him this," he said. "Tell him I'm not done." Then, with a flick of his wrist, he stunned the boy and vanished into the night. Snape appeared beside him moments later, his expression unreadable. "You spared him?" "I'm not like them," Elias said. Snape's lips curved faintly. "No, not yet." And as they walked through the mist, neither spoke again. But in the quiet of his heart, Elias felt something stir. A fragile hope that perhaps if he kept walking this narrow path between shadow and light, he might one day find his way back to the person he had once been. The war had only begun. But this time he would not fight for vengeance. He would fight for redemption. The months that followed blurred into a rhythm of war. Nights were filled with whispers, coded letters, and missions that left no trace but blood upon the ground. Elias Thorn no longer dwelled in one place for long. Sometimes he fought beside the Order, sometimes alone, sometimes in the gray silence between both. He had become a ghost again, this time by choice. The Dark Lord's shadow lengthened across Britain. Villages burned in the countryside, and the Ministry of Magic was beginning to fracture under fear. Dumbledore's order grew desperate. Spies vanished, allies turned traitor, and in every whisper of the wind, Elias could hear the serpent's voice calling his name. Yet he pressed on. He had no illusions of heroism. He did not dream of glory. He fought only to undo what he had helped create, to tear down the power that had once tempted him. His father's wand felt heavy in his grip, older now, worn smooth from nights of battle. Sometimes, in the silence after a duel, Elias wondered how many more lives he could take before the darkness claimed him again. One night, Dumbledore summoned him to the astronomy tower. The headmaster stood the cold, his robes billowing in the wind, the stars mirrored in his eyes. "It has begun," Dumbledore said without turning. "Voldemort has taken the Department of Mysteries. He seeks a prophecy, one that concerns Harry Potter. And you, Elias, are the only one who can reach his followers unseen." Elias bowed his head. "You want me to go to him?" "I want you to listen," said Dumbledore softly. "There are times when silence carries more power than any spell. Elias hesitated. "He'll kill me." "Perhaps," Dumbledore said, "or perhaps he will believe you return to him. Men like Voldemort see what they wish to see. Give him what he expects until the moment he does not. And when he discovers the truth," Dumbledore's gaze met his, steady as stone, "then you will do what you must, as we all must." Elias nodded slowly. "When do I leave?" "Tonight." He apparated to the outskirts of London, where the ruins of an old church stood silent beneath the moon. It was there that the mark upon his arm began to burn again. He drew his sleeve back and stared at it, the serpent writhing faintly against his skin, and he felt the old sickness stir inside him. He whispered the ancient summons that only Death Eaters knew, and shadows moved between the gravestones. Lucius Malfoy appeared first, elegant, cold, wand gleaming silver in his hand. "Well," he said with a faint smirk, "the prodigal son returns." Elias met his gaze. "The Dark Lord called, I came. Did you?" Lucius's eyes glimmered. "Or did you come to die?" Elias said nothing. The circle of cloaked figures tightened, and then through them a shape glided forward, pale, tall, terrible. Voldemort. "Elias Thorne," the Dark Lord said softly, "I thought I had killed you." "You tried," Elias said. Voldemort's eyes gleamed like blood in moonlight. "You defied me. You fled. Yet here you stand, alive, unbroken. Tell me, why?" Elias drew a slow breath. "Because I realized what you could not. Fear is not power. It's weakness." There was a hiss from the circle, wands raised. Voldemort's smile widened. "Bravery," he murmured. "Still a Gryffindor after all." "I'm not here to defy you," Elias said quickly. "I'm here to serve. I've walked among the Order. I know their plans. I can bring you what you seek." Voldemort's gaze lingered on him, searching. "Lies come easily to those who have lived in shadow, but truth leaves marks, Thorn. Do you still bear mine?" Elias pulled back his sleeve. The mark gleamed black against his skin. Voldemort extended his pale hand. The air grew thick, and Elias felt his body shudder beneath the weight of the curse that did not come. Instead, Voldemort whispered, "Then prove yourself once more." A small golden sphere floated through the air into the Dark Lord's grasp, a prophecy orb, faintly glowing. "The Ministry holds this twin to the one I seek. Bring it to me from their vaults. Fail, and your soul will serve me in pieces." Elias bowed low. "As you command, my lord." When he rose, the serpent eyes were already turned elsewhere, dismissing him as one might dismiss a shadow. He vanished into the night before the Death Eaters could follow. Elias did not return to Hogwarts. He went instead to the Ministry itself, slipping through its wards under a cloak of concealment woven by Dumbledore's hand. The halls were silent, the torches burning low. Statues of witches and wizards loomed in the darkness, their faces watching as he descended into the Department of Mysteries. He reached the Hall of Prophecy just before dawn. Rows upon rows of glass orbs lined the shelves, each whispering faintly in voices that were not quite sound. His fingers brushed along the labels until he found the one Voldemort sought, its glow soft, its magic pulsing like a heartbeat. He lifted it carefully, feeling its weight. For a moment the orb whispered in his mind, "Neither can live while the other survives." He understood then why Voldemort desired it, and why Dumbledore feared it. He stood there for a long time, torn between duty and vengeance. Then he heard footsteps. Oars. A spell flared, and he ducked behind a pillar as blue light seared the air. "Hold!" shouted a familiar voice, gruff, scarred, unmistakable, Mad-Eye Moody. Elias froze. Moody's magical eye spun toward him. Show yourself. There was no point hiding. Elias stepped forward, the prophecy in his hand. Moody's wand rose instantly. Thorn, he growled. You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here. I'm not your enemy, Elias said. You're holding ministry property, boy. That says otherwise. Elias hesitated, then extended the orb. Take it. Dumbledore sent me. Moody's good eye narrowed. Prove it. Elias raised his left arm. The mark was still visible. He said even the darkness can serve the light. For a moment neither moved. Then Moody lowered his wand slightly. Merlin's beard, he muttered. He's making spies out of Death Eaters now. I'm not a Death Eater, Elias said quietly. Not anymore. Moody took the orb, studying him. You've got fire, Thorn. Your father would have been proud, but you best pray Dumbledore's right about you, or I'll be the one to end it. Elias nodded. I'd expect nothing less. By dawn, the orb was safely in Dumbledore's hands. The headmaster placed it within the room of requirement, sealing it with ancient wards. You've done well, he said, but Voldemort will not forgive this. He will come for you. I know, Elias replied. Let him. Dumbledore smiled faintly. The courage of Gryffindor and the cunning of Slytherin. A dangerous combination indeed. Elias met his gaze. What happens now? Now, said Dumbledore, you rest. There will be another battle soon, and it will not be fought with wands alone. Elias looked out the window where storm clouds gathered over the lake once more. He could almost hear the distant echo of Voldemort's rage on the wind. The prophecy's words haunted him. Neither can live while the other survives. And he wondered whether those words might someday bind him as well. But for now, there was quiet. The first fragile quiet he had known in years. He closed his eyes and let it settle over him like snow, knowing it would not last. For wars end, but darkness never dies. It only waits, patient as time, for hearts like his to falter. The calm before the storm lasted scarcely a fortnight. It was the kind of calm that hummed with dread, the kind that trembled beneath the skin of the world like a held breath. Even Hogwarts felt it. The enchanted ceilings dimmed earlier than usual, and whispers followed the teachers down every corridor. News from beyond the castle was grim. Death Eaters had struck Diagon Alley, and the Ministry, desperate and blind, had begun arresting its own. Elias Thorne watched the sky from the battlements, the cold wind cutting across his face. The scars on his arms had not faded, nor had the burning of the mark that bound him to his enemy. But since his return to Dumbledore's side, the fire within it had changed. It no longer felt like ownership. It felt like defiance. That night, as the last snow of winter drifted over the lake, Dumbledore summoned him once more. The headmaster's office was darker than usual, lit only by the faint glow of foxes' feathers. Dumbledore stood at his desk, his fingers resting on a map spread wide, a map of England marked with silver pins and shifting lines of magic. They are moving, Dumbledore said without turning. Voldemort's armies gather in the north. The prophecy you retrieved confirmed what I feared. The Dark Lord's obsession has reached its zenith. Harry Potter, Elias said quietly. Dumbledore nodded. He believes the boy to be his equal and his undoing, but obsession makes even the wise careless. That is our advantage. Elias stepped closer. You want me to infiltrate his ranks again? Dumbledore's gaze softened. No, Elias. This time I want you to lead. The words struck him like a blow. Lead? The Order needs more than faith, Dumbledore said. It needs courage from those who have known darkness. They will follow you if you stand for something greater than vengeance. Elias stared at the map, his throat tight. They still don't trust me. Then earn it, said Dumbledore simply. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the strength to face it again and again. Elias bowed his head. What do you want me to do? Voldemort's lieutenants meet in the ruins of Rookwood Manor in 2 nights. End them before they bring his army south. The wind howled across the moor as Elias apparated to the ruins. The night was moonless, the air thick with the scent of snow and iron. He was not alone. Behind him, a handful of wizards moved silently, members of the Order, cloaked and grim. Moody, Lupin, Kingsley. They had not spoken since they met in the field. They didn't need to. Every one of them knew what waited in those ruins. As they approached the shattered manor, a pale light flickered within. Shadows moved behind broken windows, and the faint hiss of laughter drifted through the air. Elias raised his wand. No mercy, he whispered. The others nodded. They struck as one. The doors exploded inward with a thunderclap, and spells burst like lightning. Green and red light filled the hall, shattering stone, tearing through dust. Death Eaters spun to face them, their masks gleaming in the firelight. Elias moved through the chaos like wind through flame. Every duel was a memory, every curse a reckoning. He met Lucius Malfoy's cold gaze across the wreckage, and for a moment time froze. "Thorn," Lucius sneered. "The half-blood traitor." Elias's answer was a curse. "Expulso," Lucius countered with a flick of silver light. Sparks exploded between them, throwing both men backward. Elias rolled to his feet, his heart hammering. The room was a storm of noise, shouts, fire, and breaking glass. He caught sight of Moody battling 2 Death Eaters at once, his wand whirling like steel. Lupin had cornered another near the stairs, his eyes glinting gold in the dim light. Elias turned back to Lucius. The man had lost his wand but drew a dagger instead, its edge glowing with runes. He lunged, but Elias met him halfway. The clash sent a burst of magic through the room, and both were thrown apart again. When Elias rose, his father's wand blazed with red light. "This is for the man you murdered," he said. Lucius's expression twisted. "Your father died a fool." Elias's voice was low. "Then so be it." The curse that followed was silent, but it struck with the weight of a storm. Lucius crumpled, the dagger falling from his hand. For a long moment, Elias stood there, chest heaving. Then he turned toward the sound of another cry. Moody had fallen. A Death Eater loomed over him, wand raised. Without thought, Elias threw himself forward, shouting a wordless spell. The air cracked. The Death Eater was hurled into the wall, collapsing in a heap. Moody groaned, blood streaking his face. "You fight like a demon, Thorn," he rasped. "Maybe there's hope for you yet." When the last of the Death Eaters fell, the manor burned. Flames crawled across the old stone, consuming centuries of rot and evil. Elias stood in the doorway watching the fire rise. Lupin joined him, silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You didn't have to save him." "Moody?" Elias asked. Lupin shook his head. "Lucius, you could have let him live. Let the Aurors take him." Elias looked back at the flames. "Some things don't deserve saving." Lupin studied him quietly. "Be careful, Elias. If you let vengeance be your compass, you'll find yourself walking in the same direction as the men you fight." Elias didn't answer. The fire roared louder, throwing sparks into the sky. They returned to Hogwarts before dawn. The great hall was dark, the torches extinguished. Only Dumbledore waited, his wand casting a soft glow. "It is done?" he asked. Elias nodded. "Rookwood's circle is gone." Dumbledore's eyes closed briefly. "Then we have bought ourselves time." Moody limped forward, muttering. The boy fought like a dragon, nearly took the manor down himself. Dumbledore smiled faintly. "I never doubted it." Elias turned away. "You should have." "Doubt," said Dumbledore, "is what keeps the wise from arrogance, and courage, Elias, is what keeps the wounded from despair. Do not lose either." Elias hesitated. "How many more before it ends?" "More than you wish," Dumbledore said softly, "but fewer than you fear." That night, as dawn crept through the castle, Elias walked alone along the battlements once more. The sky was streaked with red and gold, the snow on the lake reflecting its light. He thought of his father, of Clara, of Snape, whose loyalties remained veiled even now. He thought of Voldemort, still out there, still gathering power. The war had taken everything from him, yet in its ashes he had found something unexpected. Purpose. Not peace, not redemption. Those would come later, if they came at all, but the will to stand when others fell. He drew his wand and raised it toward the horizon. The light caught upon it, bright and fierce. The Gryffindor, who had become a Death Eater, had returned to fight again. And this time he would not stop until the darkness itself learned fear. Spring returned to Hogwarts with a false gentleness. The air smelled of rain and thawed earth. The meadows glittered with dew, and the first green leaves unfurled along the paths leading down to the Black Lake. Yet beneath the castle's beauty lay a current of dread. The world beyond its walls was breaking apart, and even the youngest students could feel it in their bones. Elias Thorne walked those same paths each dawn, his cloak drawn close, his eyes never resting long on any horizon. Peace unsettled him now. Silence was too easily mistaken for safety. In every rustle of leaves, in every echo of laughter drifting from the courtyards, he heard the ghost of the storm that would one day return. The battle at Rookwood Manor had made him a legend in whispers. Among the Order, he was spoken of with wary respect. The Gryffindor who fought like a Death Eater, yet bled for the light. But fame was an armor too thin for what lingered in his heart. At night, he dreamed of fire and screams, of faces he could not save. Dumbledore, ever patient, offered neither praise nor judgment. "You have learned to fight," the headmaster said one evening as they stood in the tower overlooking the lake. "Now you must learn to forgive." Elias stared at the reflection of the moon in the water. "Forgiveness is for the dead." "No," Dumbledore said gently. "It is for the living, lest they become the dead in spirit before their time." Elias said nothing. He had no answer for wisdom that cut so quietly. It was on a rain-soaked afternoon that a letter came, a small parchment sealed with crimson wax. He broke it open with shaking hands, for the handwriting was one he knew too well. "Elias, I have heard what you've done. The world says you are a hero again, though I don't know if that word means anything anymore. Father says the war is coming to our doorstep soon. I keep hoping we'll all survive long enough to see peace. Please, if you can, stay alive. That would be enough for me. Clara." He read it twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it inside his coat. For the first time in months, he allowed himself a fragile smile, but peace, as ever, was fleeting. That same night, an emergency summons came from the Order. Elias apparated to their hidden stronghold, a cottage deep in the woods of Devon. Inside, the air buzzed with unease. Moody, Kingsley, Lupin, and several others stood around a table scattered with maps. "They've taken Clara's father," Kingsley said grimly. "Or Dawlish, captured during a raid outside London. He's being held at Malfoy Manor." Elias's heart clenched. "Then we're going after him." Moody's magical eye whirled toward him. "It's a trap. You know it." "I don't care." Lupin laid a hand on his shoulder. "Elias, you can't storm Malfoy Manor alone." Elias met his gaze, and something in his eyes silenced the older man. "I won't be alone," he said. "You'll help me." And so, against reason and fear, they went. The night was black as ink when they arrived on the hillside overlooking the manor. The grand estate sprawled below, like a scar of silver and shadow, its windows glowing faintly through the mist. Lupin turned to him. "We'll breach the western wing. Quick and quiet." Elias nodded, though his pulse thundered in his ears. "If we're seen, then we end it fast." They moved through the darkness, wands drawn, their boots silent on the wet grass. The wards shimmered faintly, ancient and cruel. Elias raised his wand, whispering a counter-curse his father had once taught him. The air shimmered, and then the barrier dissolved. They slipped inside. The halls of Malfoy Manor were cold and gleaming, lined with portraits that turned their faces away as the intruders passed. Somewhere above, the faint echo of a scream carried through the corridors. "Downstairs," Elias whispered. "He's in the dungeons." They descended the marble stairs, the sound of water dripping from the stone ceiling. The air grew heavy with the stench of fear and old magic. When they reached the lowest corridor, they saw him, John Dawlish, bound to a chair, blood on his face. His wand snapped at his feet. And standing before him was Bellatrix Lestrange. Her laughter was soft, almost tender. "Tell me, Dawlish, do you think the Order will come for you? They never do. They know better." Elias's hand trembled on his wand. Rage welled up like fire in his chest. He stepped into the light. "She's wrong," he said. Bellatrix turned, her eyes wide for only a moment before delight curved her lips. "Oh, how lovely the traitor returns." "Let him go," Elias said. She tilted her head. "Or you'll what? Curse me like you cursed poor Lucius?" Elias didn't answer. He moved first. Their spells collided with a thunderous crack. Fire burst across the walls, shattering glass and stone. Lupin dove to free Dawlish as Elias dueled Bellatrix across the chamber. Her laughter never stopped, and every curse she hurled came faster, more ferocious, until his defenses faltered. She slashed her wand through the air. Crucio. An agony tore through him. His vision blurred, the world twisting into red and white, but he refused to fall. With a roar he countered, sending a wave of raw magic that shattered her spell. "Still a Gryffindor," she sneered. "You'll die like one." "Maybe," he gasped, "but not tonight." He struck with everything left in him. The spell hit her squarely, hurling her backward into the stone wall. When she fell, she did not rise. Silence followed, the chamber filled with smoke and the stench of scorched stone. Lupin staggered toward him, supporting Dawlish, who clung weakly to his shoulder. "We have to go," Lupin said. "Now!" Elias nodded, dizzy with pain. They apparated just as alarms echoed through the manor. They arrived in the woods beyond the cottage at dawn. Dawlish collapsed to the ground, trembling, but alive. Lupin began tending his wounds while Elias sank to his knees, exhausted. His body shook from the aftermath of Bellatrix's curse, and his wand hand bled from where her magic had torn through his grip. Dumbledore appeared moments later, summoned by the phoenix flame Lupin had conjured. His gaze swept over them. Elias, pale and battered, Dawlish, barely conscious, Lupin silent with fatigue. "Alive," Dumbledore murmured. "That will do." He looked to Elias. "You saved him." Elias met his eyes. "I didn't do it for him." Dumbledore's expression softened. "No," he said, "you did it for her. And that, too, can be a kind of love worth fighting for." That night, alone again in his tower room, Elias opened Clara's letter once more. His hand trembled as he traced her name, the parchment smudged with ash from the battle. He whispered into the quiet, "I'm still alive." The moonlight poured through the window, silver and cold. And though the world outside was darkening, though the war pressed closer with every breath, Elias felt something stir within him, a fragile, flickering light that refused to die. The Gryffindor who had fallen into darkness had begun, at last, to climb toward dawn. Summer came to Hogwarts like a quiet reprieve after years of thunder. The skies cleared, the lake shimmered gold beneath the sun, and laughter, rare, fragile laughter, returned to the courtyards. Yet all who dwelled within those ancient walls knew the peace was a lie, a breath between storms. The Dark Lord's power still grew in the world beyond, and Dumbledore's forces prepared for a reckoning that would decide the fate of them all. Elias Thorne stood upon the balcony of the West Tower, his cloak stirring in the warm breeze. Below him, students walked in pairs along the lawns, unaware of how close the end might be. His own reflection flickered faintly in the glass. Older now, his features sharpened by loss and fire. The mark still burned upon his arm, though he had long since stopped flinching at it. It was a scar now, not a chain. He had saved Clara's father, and the mission at Malfoy Manor had shifted something in the war. The Order whispered his name, now not as a curse, but as a promise. Yet Elias took no pride in it. Every victory left ghosts behind, and the faces of the fallen haunted his sleep. That morning Dumbledore summoned him once more. The message came with a phoenix feather, its red and gold plume still warm from flight. Elias followed it to the headmaster's office, where the air was heavy with candle smoke and the faint scent of parchment. Dumbledore looked older than he ever had before. His silver beard was streaked with ash, and his eyes, though bright, carried a sadness that no magic could disguise. "Sit, Elias," he said quietly. "There is little time." Elias obeyed, unease creeping through him. "What's happened?" "The war nears its end," Dumbledore said. "But before it does, there is one final task, one only you can do." Elias's pulse quickened. "Tell me." The headmaster reached into his robes and drew forth a small crystal vial within which swirled a faint memory, silver smoke dancing like light upon water. "This," Dumbledore said, "is a memory stolen from Severus Snape. It concerns the Dark Lord's Horcruxes, the pieces of his soul." Elias's breath caught. "You found one?" Dumbledore nodded. "Perhaps more than one, but I am dying, Elias. My time is nearly spent." Elias shook his head. "No. Do not waste it on protest," Dumbledore said gently. "You must listen. Voldemort believes that by splitting his soul, he has conquered death, but each fragment is bound to an object of great meaning. Destroy them, and you destroy his immortality." He held Elias's gaze. "I need you to find one such object, the locket of Salazar Slytherin. It was last in the hands of Regulus Black, who defied the Dark Lord before his death. His brother Sirius kept what little remained of his possessions." Elias frowned. grim old place? Yes, Dumbledore said. You must go there tonight. Take what you find and bring it back. But be warned, the house is cursed with secrets, and the past will not rest quietly. Elias stood, resolve hardening in him. I'll bring it back, Dumbledore nodded. Be swift and be wary. The path you walk now lies between light and shadow. You have walked it before. Walk it once more, and you may yet save us all. That night, Elias apparated to London under a cloak of invisibility. The city lay shrouded in fog, its streets empty, its lamplight dim. The Black family home rose from the mist like a fortress of despair, its windows dark, its walls humming with enchantment. He crossed the threshold, and the air thickened instantly. Shadows stirred in the corners, and whispers echoed faintly through the corridors, ghostly murmurs of the house's former masters. The portrait of Walburga Black shrieked as he passed, but Elias ignored her, his wand raised high. Lumos. The hall flared with pale light, revealing dust, cobwebs, and the tarnished remnants of ancient pride. He moved quickly, searching through rooms heavy with the scent of old magic. Portraits glared, books whispered, and somewhere deep within the house, a clock ticked, though none lived to wind it. At last he found the study. The room was filled with relics, silver goblets engraved with serpents, blackened candlesticks, and an ornate cabinet locked by enchantment. Elias could feel it the moment he entered, the hum of dark power, faint but undeniable. He approached, muttering counter curses beneath his breath. The lock shimmered, resisted, then burst open with a crack. Inside lay a small golden locket, gleaming faintly even in the dim light. The crest of Slytherin shone upon its surface, a serpent coiled in a circle. Elias reached for it, but the moment his fingers brushed the gold, the air exploded with shadow. The room grew colder, the candles guttered. From the darkness a voice hissed, "You cannot destroy what you are." Elias staggered back. The locket floated in the air before him, its light twisting into visions. He saw himself, cloaked, masked, wand raised against Clara, against his father, against everything he had once been. He shouted, "No!" and flung a spell. The illusion shattered, but the locket's voice deepened, mocking, "You are not the light. You are mine." Pain ripped through him. The mark on his arm flared, burning as though freshly carved. He fell to his knees clutching it, his vision swimming with darkness. And then, through the agony, another voice came, soft, steady, familiar. "Elias," it said. He looked up. A shape had appeared in the doorway, tall, black-cloaked, eyes cold as obsidian. "Snape, I expected as much," the potions master said quietly, stepping into the room. "Dumbledore sent me to make sure you didn't get yourself killed." Elias gasped for breath. "The locket, it's alive." "All Horcruxes are," Snape said. "They feed on fear, show it none." Together they raised their wands. Snape whispered a curse older than memory, and Elias followed with fire. The room blazed and the locket screamed, a sound like tearing metal and breaking glass. Then it fell silent, the gold melted to ash. When the flames died, only smoke remained. Snape stood over the ashes, his face unreadable. "One piece destroyed," he said. "Many remain." Elias sank against the wall, exhausted. "Then we keep going." Snape regarded him for a long moment. "You truly are your father's son," he murmured, "but you are also something he never was." Elias looked up. "What's that?" "Unforgivable and yet forgiven." He turned and left the room before Elias could speak. By dawn, Elias was back at Hogwarts. The castle's towers gleamed pale against the rising sun, and Dumbledore waited in the courtyard, Fawkes perched upon his arm. "It's done," Elias said, holding out the shard of blackened gold. Dumbledore took it with reverence, his expression grave but hopeful. "You have done what few could. The end draws near, Elias. When it comes, remember this. Courage is not in the wand, but in the will to wield it rightly." Elias bowed his head. "I'll remember." As he walked away, the sun broke fully over the lake, gilding the castle in light. The battle ahead would decide everything, whether he would die as a Death Eater, live as a hero, or vanish as something between. But for that single moment standing upon the edge of dawn, Elias Thorne allowed himself to believe that redemption, hard-earned and blood-bound, might at last be within reach, and the Gryffindor, who had once fallen into darkness, took his first true step toward the light.